There's going to be parts of any job that like you don't love, that's not glamorous, that's not sexy. That's just part of it. But like a decent percentage of it, if we all have to work, we all have to make a living, we all got to do something. I'd rather do something I enjoy.
Well, hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Rock Your Brand podcast. I'm your host, Scott Voker, a serial entrepreneur on a mission to help you. This show is designed to teach you, to inspire you, to motivate you to take massive action and build a future-proof business. So, whether you're just starting out or taking your existing business to the next level, this is your home. Now, if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's rock your brand. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Rock Your Brand podcast. This is episode 882. And today I've got a really good interview that I can't wait for you to listen to. And this guy I've known for probably just over 5 years now. And the cool thing is him and I met online, and I actually was paying attention to what he was doing as far as a marketing thing, although he is in a completely different market, a completely different niche. But I had a friend of mine that had him on his podcast, and then that got me thinking, you know what, I should probably reach out to this guy. And we had another mutual friend, Jamie Masters, who then introduced us. And the guy I'm talking about is Grant Baldwin. Now, what a great guy. Let me just say, this guy has got a lot of energy, kind of like me. And the funny thing is, him and I have a lot in common. He met his wife in high school. It was his high school sweetheart. I didn't meet my wife in high school, but I did meet her almost immediately after I graduated. And then from there, got married very, very young. And so did he. And, we just got a lot of similar outlooks on life and business. And his story, oh my gosh, like his story is so similar to mine. Not like he was in construction or anything like that, but it's just crazy how when you start something, it leads you to the next thing. And then you think you've arrived, and then you get there and you're like, wait a minute here, this isn't exactly where I want to be because it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, or maybe our lifestyle changed, whatever. And then boom, you got another pivot, and then you're going down that road, and then this pandemic hits, and then your business is flipped upside down. So all of that stuff is what you're going to be listening to during this interview. And it was just great to catch back up with Grant. I haven't talked to him in probably a few months, but I said to him, I said, listen, I got to get you on the podcast. I don't know why I haven't gotten you on sooner. And now that we're doing these Wednesday spotlights with these, really great stories, but just great people that I want to introduce you to. So again, that's what this interview is going to be all about. You will be motivated, inspired, and you're going to learn stuff along the way here too. So I'm going to stop talking now so you can enjoy this interview that I did with my good friend, Mr. Grant Baldwin. All right, Grant, welcome to the Rock Your Brand podcast. This has been a long time coming, brother. How you doing, man? How's everything going?
Listen, it's been way too long. You and I have spent already a ton of time before we hit record here, just catching up on life. I'm honored to be here. I'm a huge Scott fan. So thanks for letting me hang out with you, man.
Yeah, no, this has been a long time coming. And you and I were just talking. I'm like, haven't I had you on the podcast before? You're like, no, you really haven't, because you were really heavy into the Amazon thing. And I'm like, damn, really? I should have had you on anyway, just because I like talking to you. But yeah, man, it's been a long time and a lot has happened. And I just love your story. And these episodes on Wednesday are always about bringing someone on that has a really good story, but also that has pivoted along the way. Because I don't think there's any one straight narrow path.
Yep.
It might seem so at first, but then it's like, wait a minute here. I don't really feel I'm going in this direction for whatever reason. I need to change, whatever.
Yep.
So that's what this is all about. So what I'm going to do is have you give us a little bit of a backstory on Grant. Give us a little bit of that backstory there, Grant. Who the heck are you anyway? Where'd you come from?
Yeah. Came from my mom. So if we go back in time, in high school, I was really involved in my local church, and my youth pastor had a big impact on my life. And it really resonated with me. I was like, I want to do that. Like, that seems like a cool gig. And so that was kind of the path I was on. I went to Bible college, worked at a local church as a youth pastor, and it gave me a lot of opportunities to speak. And I felt like I was decent at speaking. And ultimately decided like, I want to be a speaker. I want to be a professional speaker. I don't know what that means or what that looks like, but that just seems like a cool gig.
Mm.
And so that's kind of what I started to work towards. Is I met a couple speakers, was stalking different speakers online, emailing them like, hey, how do I do this? That sort of thing. And eventually like started to learn a few things, was booking gigs here and there. And eventually got to a point where I was doing it full time. I was doing, 30, 40 gigs and then 50, 60 gigs and then 60, 70 gigs, and was doing about 70 gigs a year and
Wow.
loved it. It was great. And one of the challenges I was starting to run into was that speaking is a high paying manual labor job, in
Mm.
that I would get paid really, really well to stand on stage and speak, but it was dependent on me getting on a plane, leaving my family, going someplace. And the 1 hour I was on stage or whatever it would be a blast, but it was still dependent on me going somewhere. So
Mm.
I had a job, not necessarily a business. Now, at the same time, I was having a lot of people who were in the same spot where I was initially, who were asking me like, hey, you're a speaker. That's really cool. I would love to be a speaker. How would I go about doing that? And so I started, teaching a little bit of it, just kind of randomly here and there. I enjoyed the topic. I enjoyed the subject. And that really started to pick up more and more. And long story short, like over time, started really ramping that up more and decreasing the amount of speaking that I was personally doing, and just doing more of the teaching and training and the coaching side. So if we fast forward to today, I run a training company called the Speaker Lab, where we teach people how to find and book paid speaking gigs. And so we have speakers who are doing it, who have gone through our training stuff and are doing it full time now, and those who are just getting started, and those who are in all different types of industries, 37 different countries around the world. And so we help speakers like me, who were where I was when I got started, going like, I have the potential, but I need the plan. I knew I was an okay speaker. I was a decent speaker, wanted to do more of it. No idea, how much do you charge, or who do you speak to, or who hires speakers? Like, how does the mysterious speaking industry
Mm.
work? And that's what we try to do, is we try to help speakers understand how that world works, so that they can find and book gigs and share their message with the world.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and you did a great job of making that like really concise. But I do need to go back a little ways.
That's fine. We
And
go
that
wherever you
is,
want to go.
yeah. And, okay, so you said, you know what, I'm going to be a youth pastor. I'm going to go
Mm-hmm.
down that road, and you start going down that road. When does that shift, like in your mind? And like, cause I always like to try to unpack like that shift,
Yep.
because you're going this route, and you're like, all right, something in your head changes, or something
Yep.
you see changes your path, or where you want to go. Where was that, I guess, point in your life? What made that happen?
Yeah, I think there were a couple things in that particular role. One was the guy that I was working for wasn't the best guy to work for. He was just kind of a jerk at times, and I'm just kind of like, is this the way it is? And I was just like, I don't love doing this. The other thing that was a bit of a challenge was I felt like I was working constantly. My wife and I were newly married. She was pregnant with our first child. I was gone, most days working at the office, but then I was gone at nights for various activities or functions or things I had to attend. I was just gone a lot, and it was just starting to wear on me. It was wearing on her. And so I remember her and I had kind of talked about it. I remember kind of I remember kind of the breaking point, so to speak, was I remember at the time we were living in Missouri, and I was attending a conference, a kind of a youth pastors conference sort of deal in Nashville, which is coincidentally where we live now. And so I was at this conference, and I remember sitting in this session, and I remember I don't even remember who the speaker was, but I remember he said something to the effect of, if you don't enjoy at least 80% of what you're doing, you should find something different. And I remember like kind of looking around the room like, wait, did anybody else just hear that? Like, what, does anybody enjoy 80% of what they're doing? With the reality is, like, there's going to be parts of any job that like you don't love, that's not glamorous, that's not sexy. That's just part of it. But like a decent percentage of it, if we all have to work, we all have to make a living, we all got to do something. I'd rather do something I enjoy. And at the time, I just felt like I'm nowhere near 80%. And so I remember I came back from that and turned in my resignation. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I know like this isn't it. And I would say for the next, 6 to 12 months, and actually to back up, when I left that role, my wife was, I think, 4 to 5 months pregnant, somewhere in there.
Oh, wow.
First child on the way. It's not like we had any savings or, I'd made a lot of money or anything like that at all. And so there were plenty of like good intention, well-intentioned question marks from family members and friends like, hey, have you thought this through? Like, is now the best time? Like, hey, all for finding what you want to do with life, but like, this doesn't seem like a great time. And in
Mm,
retrospect, like, yeah, it was awful timing. But for the next several months, I worked a couple different odd jobs. I worked for a security company doing like residential, like home security system sales. I worked a couple different restaurants as a server, and it was just kind of like hodgepodge stuff just to like make ends meet. None of this was like
mhm.
career aspirations, but in part, it was just kind of I need to pay bills. I need to provide for the family, and I also just kind of like licking my wounds and thinking through like, what do I want to do with my life? Like, what do I want to be when I grow up? And
Mm.
the thing I kind of kept coming back to was speaking. And so it was really those several months of processing and figuring out what that next step looked like was some of the more difficult, but also some of the more rewarding months of life of going like, let's go all the way back to the drawing board. If you could do anything, what would you want to do? And there's far too many people that we both meet, that we both interact with and know, who are like, I gotta, we all have to eat, we all have to live
Yep.
indoors, we all have to provide for the family somehow. But like, I'd rather do something I enjoy. And you and I both feel very, very fortunate and blessed that we get to do something that we enjoy. But it's not because like we're some lucky chosen few that we're given
Right.
this opportunity. Like, you and I have both
Mhm.
been really, really, really intentional to build not just the business, but to build our lives in the way that we've built them, so that we have, the freedom and flexibility and autonomy that we have. And so
Mhm.
those several months there really, really were helpful for me to kind of process some things, to get to the point of like, okay, I don't know how exactly I'm going to get there, but let's figure out where the destination is and start moving that direction.
Now it sounds like though your wife was supportive. Am I
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've always had my wife has always been amazing. We were high school sweethearts. We've been married at the time of this recording for, I think, 18 years, 18 and a half years, been together 23 years. And she's always been like, I believe in you. I support you. What you want to do, you'll figure it out.
Mhm.
And so that gave me massive confidence for sure.
Mm.
And at the same time, I knew like I'm a hardworking guy. I'm a motivated guy. So it wasn't like, I'm going to just, give me 6 months to go hike around in the woods and find myself.
Right.
And it's like, no, no, like I still got to pay bills right
Mhm.
now. We've got this new kid on the way. I got to figure some stuff out. And I don't want to dilly dally or mess this up. So she was very, very supportive. And for those next several months, like I was working a lot of these just kind of hodgepodge jobs just to make
Sure.
ends meet. But I knew like it was temporary. Like we both
Mhm.
recognized that. Like it was buying time and it was leading to something else.
So, okay, so now you're at the point where you're like, okay, I'm trying to figure this thing out. You're hodgepodging some jobs together, making some money. Uh, okay, how does it get to where you're able to actually provide for your family by speaking? So,
Yep.
kind of lead me into that part of the story because I think that's another part where it's like, okay, you want to do this, but can you do this? Like,
Yep.
can you really make money from just speaking? Like, really? It's like, walk me through that.
Yeah, so it's definitely not anytime you're starting any type of entrepreneurial endeavor, as you well know, it's not like, on Friday afternoon, you're like, I'm going to quit my job and Monday I'm going to be a full-time speaker. Like, it doesn't
Right.
work like that, you know?
Right.
It took a couple years to go from 0 gigs to the point where I was doing it full time.
Mhm.
And so it's just an iterative process. Like, so I
Mm.
mentioned that I had a couple hodgepodge jobs. And so as my speaking business was growing, then I might have left the sales job or one of the restaurants,
Sure.
and then another restaurant, and just it's slowly building there. So it's never like this. I'm just going to run and jump off the cliff, and I hope it all works out. Like it
Mhm.
was you're trying to build up enough momentum there where you're going, okay, I feel pretty comfortable and confident that we can make this work. And um, I think you would attest to this, that we've both, been self-employed for quite a while now. We've been at it for a
Oh,
long
yeah.
time. And I've shared the story before, but I remember a couple years ago, I was at this entrepreneur meetup breakfast thing here in the Nashville area. And there was a buddy of mine who was there. He'd been working on this side hustle for a little while, and he had just quit his job to go all in on this side hustle. And so I remember talking with him at this breakfast. It was his first like week being all in on the side hustle thing. And I said, dude, you're doing it. How do you feel? And I remember him saying like, I'm excited, I'm anxious, I'm scared, I'm worried, I'm thrilled, I'm all of the like the whole gamut of emotions, right?
Yep.
And I remember telling him, I was like, man, I've been self-employed for, at this point now, 13, 14 years, something like that. And I was like, all those feelings don't go away. There are days you're just like, man, I'm killing it. Like we got this thing figured out. And then there's days you're just like, well, we had a good run. That was fun. I guess we got to find a job. I wonder if Scott's going to hire, and it's just like, that's just the way it is. Like, I think one of the biggest parts of entrepreneurship is learning to manage the mental highs and lows. Because when it's good, it's really good. And when it's bad, like it's tough. It's really, really tough. And you have the same doubts and insecurities and fears and worries that any entrepreneur at any level has. And so that was like those first few years of just like, I think I've got enough momentum. I think I got enough momentum. And there were still like great months and slow months and everything in between. And you have to like, so much of it is just figuring it out, of doing the work. I remember an entrepreneur speaker friend said, like, you have to fall in love with the work. And because like for in my world as a speaker, people love being on stage. Like we love that part, but like a very small percentage of being a speaker is actually being on stage speaking. Like a lot of it is just the business side of it. And so a good example of this is like in the book, The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. He talks about the difference between being a baker and running a bakery. Like those are two totally different skill sets. Like just because you're a good baker, you bake amazing bread or cakes or cookies or whatever, doesn't necessarily mean that you can run a bakery. And like, and as an entrepreneur, like you really have to have both, you have to wear both hats most of the time, like in your world, like you can design an amazing product, but if no one knows it exists, or, your costs are too high for it, or you don't understand like, profit margins or how to advertise or any of those things, like it doesn't matter how great the product is. Right. So you have to be able to, you have to be a baker, but you also are running a bakery. And so I tell speakers that all the time, like you're a speaker, but you're an entrepreneur, which means you are doing sales, you're doing marketing, you're doing, you're the janitor, you're wearing all the hats. And that's kind of part of what you're signing up for.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm kind of going back a little bit, but how did you figure out what you wanted to speak about?
Yeah.
I think that's a big one, right? Because it's like, okay, I want to speak, but what do I speak about?
Yeah, this is one of the biggest challenges that we see with speakers at any stage, but especially early on, is as for most people who enjoy speaking, we just enjoy speaking. So who do I speak to? I don't know. I speak to people, speak to humans. My message is for everybody. And what do you speak about? I don't know. What do you want me to speak about? I can speak about anything. Like, and you and I both know like that's a horrible approach to business. We were, in fact, right before we started recording, we were talking about some real estate investing, and we were talking about a guy that you've worked with, and part of the reason that he has done well is he specializes in, all I do is this type of house in this type of area and this type, and meets these type of requirements, and that's it. Versus saying like I do all kinds of real estate and everything. So one thing we tell speakers all the time, and I think again this is applicable and relevant for any entrepreneur, is that you want to be the steakhouse and not the buffet. The steakhouse and not the buffet. Meaning, this guy, if you and I were looking for a good steak, like we have a choice. Like we could go to a buffet where steak is one of 100 things that they offer and they're all mediocre. Or we could go to a steakhouse where they do one thing, but they do that one thing really, really, really well. So they don't do lasagna, they don't do tacos, they don't do pizza, they don't do cupcakes, they do steak, and that's it. And it's counterintuitive, but by doing that, you're able to attract the right type of customer or client, and you're repelling the wrong type. And so for me early on as a youth pastor, I really enjoyed working with teenagers. I really enjoyed working with students. So that was kind of a natural next step for me. Was the majority of the speaking I did, especially early on in my career, was in the education space. So I did a lot with high schools, did a lot of school assemblies, a lot of student leadership conferences and events. And that kind of evolved to doing some more colleges and doing stuff with parents and teachers. And so you can kind of expand over time, but not from the beginning. Don't try to do everything from day one. So the more specific, the more focused, the more narrow that you are, that actually, again, it's counterintuitive, but the easier it is to find the right type of customer and the right type of clients.
No, I think that's really important. And you're right. Like you and I were talking about that, the guy that I hooked up with for my Airbnb stuff, like I call it niching down. He niched like way down, right? Like there's Airbnbs all over the place and you can do it anywhere you want. And he said, no, we're going to do it on the lake. And we're also going to do high, like level type houses, like really like premier, like $1 million house plus. And we're going to charge a premium. And we're only going to get those types of people that are going to come in. And by golly, he's like just raking it in all across, because I'm just one of his pieces of real estate that I give him to rent, by the way. which is crazy.
Well, let me give you a quick example of this, specifically about real estate. So I remember talking with a buddy of mine who does a lot of real estate investing, and this was a few years ago. I was interested in getting into real estate investing, and I remember sitting down with him, and I remember asking him. I remember saying, "Okay, you are the expert on this. So you have all these different types of real estate investing. You have single family homes, and you have apartments and multifamily homes, and you have short-term rentals and vacation rentals, and you have commercial properties, and you have raw land, and you have on and on and on the list goes, right?" And I remember asking him, "Which one is best?" And I remember he kind of laughed and he goes, "Yes." I was like, yeah, like, what does that mean? He's like, they all work. What you won't find, though, is someone who's trying to do everything. He's like, you can find someone who's killing it with storage units, and you can find someone who's killing it with apartment units, and you can find someone who's killing it with flipping properties. I'm like, you can find people who are doing well in any category. What you don't find is people who are trying to do everything. So it can all work, but again, be the steakhouse and not the buffet.
Yep. I absolutely love that. All right, cool. Moving on. And I think that's awesome. So basically you were speaking to kids, but then at some point you made another shift, which was like, okay, I'm not just going to speak to kids. I'm going to speak on this topic of how to help people actually speak and get their message out there to the world.
Yep.
When does that shift happen? How does it happen? All that stuff.
Yeah. And I think around that time is when we connected. And so like I said, I was doing a lot of gigs. I was doing around 70 gigs a year. And so I knew that basically in order to grow the business, either I had to do more gigs or I had to charge more. And I didn't want to do more gigs. I was already traveling a lot. I was gone 80, 90 nights a year. And I was on the upper end of what I felt comfortable charging in that particular space and industry. I could have charged more in other industries, but for that market, I was like, I feel good with where I'm at. And so I was just kind of like, I felt like I had, I'd climbed that mountain to some degree, and I was like, okay, so now what, and at the time I started learning more about online business and seeing some people talk about podcasting and online courses. I'd come across some of Pat Flynn's stuff, our mutual friend there, and just trying to like, okay, what would that look like in my world? And so at the time I was doing a lot of speaking around the topic of careers and kind of what we touched on at the beginning of like figuring out what you want to do with life. And so I was speaking to high school students and college students on careers and that sort of thing. I thought it'd be interesting to do like a career podcast. And so had hired our mutual friend now, Jamie Tardy, at that time, Jamie Masters now. And she was the one that introduced us. I think at the time, actually, we both started our podcast around the same time. And so I started a podcast called How Did You Get Into That? Where I interviewed people who are just doing interesting, unique types of careers and asking them, how did you get into that? And doing it from two perspectives. One being that there's some people who are listening to, those interviews who wanted to do those careers, and other people that are like, I don't necessarily want to do that, but if they can do that for their career, surely I can figure out what I want to do. And so it's people like, an NBA mascot, a lady who is a cheesemonger, like a professional, literally cheese whiz. There was a guy who's like one of the top Lego master builders in the world, a guy who worked for Nike and worked with Michael Jordan to design some of the Air Jordans, some of those just type of careers. You're just like, that's crazy. Let's just talk about that, and so the podcast was going really, really well. And I was doing some of this teaching about speaking on the side. And so I launched this very first career course. We called it Clarity Course. And I remember, I still vividly remember like doing this very first launch, and it did okay. It did fine. Like we made probably $20,000 or something, which was still like a significant amount.
Sure.
There's something there. Like, again, I think another thing that's really important for any entrepreneur is just trusting your intuition and just trusting your gut. And so I felt like it did okay. Could we make it work? Potentially. But I was still doing some of this teaching on speaking. We're starting to get a little bit more traction there. And I was like, I think there's something there. And so basically I made the decision of like, okay, we're going to scrap this career topic and let's do the speaking thing. So we quickly created a speaking course. We did a webinar or two around that. And then we just really started to build some momentum there. And again, it wasn't like you make the decision on Friday. Okay, I'm done with the career thing, done being a speaker. I'm going all in on teaching, speaking. Like it's not like that at all. Because while I'm building the speaker training side of things, I still, again, I'm trying to provide for my family. So I can't turn off one faucet until I get the other one really going. And so it was, again, kind of a slow iterative process over the course of a couple of years, where let's keep building things up over there, and then let's keep slowing things down over here. And that's really how that transition happened, was going, I still love speaking, but I also knew like there was a cap, there was a ceiling, there was a limit to what I could personally do. And so I wanted to build more of a business that wasn't dependent on me. And so I think that we've been able to do that to a large degree now.
Yeah, a couple things there. So I want to highlight that because, okay, you were like doing your hodgepodgey job thing. And then you're like, man, if I could just get paid to speak, my life would be amazing. Everything would be just, and I would just ride off in the sunset, and we'd have a happy little family, and everything's going to be great.
Yep.
And then you do it, and you get 90 gigs a year, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, this is work. I didn't sign up for this. Sounds very familiar to my story. I got out of the construction business. You know my story. Got out of the construction business, started a photography business, thought everything was going to be great. I was going to be a photographer for the rest of my life with my wife, have a studio. We did that. And about after 6 years, we're like, we're actually kind of still have a job. Like we have to still report, and we still have to do this stuff, and we can only scale so far. And then that's where we got into the online space, started teaching more on the photography thing. It's just funny how that happens. But when you're looking at it, you're like, wait a minute, if I can just get that to work, everything's going to be great. And then you did, and then it changes. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say was, I've heard this analogy before, but it's a lot like driving a car at night. When you're driving a car at night, you can only see as far as the headlights will show you, which is just a few feet in front of you. But you can drive hundreds, if not thousands of miles that way. And that's the way life is. Like, even at this point, at the time of this recording, we're a few months into the pandemic here, and nobody saw this coming, 9 months ago, a year ago, and yet here we are. Nobody has any clue what the next couple months look like. And I would say, like, I think you and I have been at this a while, where, we have decent sized audiences and plenty of people that follow us and are familiar with what we do. And for people who are going, man, Grant, Scott, they got guys like that, they got it figured out. I promise you, we don't. And we are figuring it out as we go. We are doing the best we can. We are making it up as we go. And there are, again, like I said earlier, there are days that are great and days like, I think we're good. The winds that are back, we're going downhill in a good way. And like, this is going smooth. And days you're just like, I don't know. Nothing's working, and I don't know why, and I don't know how to fix it, and I don't know how to get things working again. And that's the way it is, So there's no guarantees of success. There's no guarantees that this is going to work, and it could all come crashing down at any moment. But again, that's kind of like driving a car at night. You're just driving. I can only see a few feet in front of me. You and I, at this moment, we have a pretty good idea what the coming weeks and months look like, but it could vastly change. It could vastly be totally different. We have no clue what the coming years look like. It's highly possible that, 5 years from now, you and I are doing things that are completely unrelated from what we're doing today. And like, you don't need to know. Like, that doesn't, like, when people ask me, like, what's your 5-year, what's your 10-year plan? I was like, I can tell you some big picture things that I'd like, but what the day-to-day looks like, man, I don't know, because nobody has any clue what life looks like that far out. So really, again, keep that in mind, that like, have some idea of where, like on the road trip, driving the car at night, have an idea of where you're going, have an idea of what that destination looks like. But there's going to be twists and turns and bumps in the road along the way that you're not anticipating and you can't plan for. And again, that's part of the journey. That's part of what you have to embrace.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that analogy too, by the way, because you can see far enough to get to where you got to go, but just not too far.
Not too far.
Yeah. Okay. So before we wrap up, because there's a couple things I want to touch on. The one here, I don't want to gloss over this. I didn't even know this part of your story. You launched a course on career, or how to find your career, and you launch it, and it does 20K ish, and you're like, okay, that was cool, but it just didn't feel right? Or was it like, it should have did better? Or like, what was that thought? Because I've been there too, right? You launch a course and you're like, yes, this is going to be amazing. And then you launch it and you're like, it didn't really hit it, or it didn't feel right, or whatever. So walk me through that point in that story.
Yeah, I think there were a couple things there. One is that the topic of Clarity course was helping people figure out get clarity on what they want to do with their life, which is a very good idea. It's really hard to execute on or deliver on, or and it's
Mhm.
kind of this like vague, squishy thing.
Mhm.
But I knew when people were asking me, hey, how do I book gigs? I knew there was like you do this, and then you do this, and then you do
Yes.
this, and you do this. And if you do these things, you arrive at this destination.
Yep.
And so I knew there was like that, there was like a true process of what I could teach
Mm.
there. So that was definitely part of it. I knew that again, it was a very, the topic of figuring out what you want to do with life could be lumped into like the buffet category. Whereas I knew
Mhm.
teaching people how to find and book gigs was
Sure.
probably more of a steakhouse. Like it's a very specific thing. We're not trying to be all things for all people. Not everybody
Mm.
wants to be a speaker, but there are plenty of people that do. And we teach that, So for example, when people say, well, people who are interested in speaking are also interested in writing a book or coaching or consulting or doing a
Mhm.
podcast or doing any number of things that I have some experience with. And we could teach those things, but we just say like, no, like we're steakhouse. We do this. And so if you
Mm.
want tacos, let me recommend a taco place down the street that has phenomenal tacos. Go check that. If you need pizza, that's not us. But if you want
Mhm.
steak, if you want this specific thing, that's what we do.
We got it.
So like picking a lane was important. The other thing I would say was, again, I think the intuition thing, I think there are times where you do something in business and it's like, it kind of worked, kind of didn't work. And you still have the sense of like, there's still something there though. Like we could make this work. And I felt like that of just like, we could make it work, but I wasn't super passionate about it or fired up of just
Mhm.
like, yeah, we're all right. We're good. We're on to something. But whenever I did the first version of our speaking course called Booked and Paid to Speak, when we first launched that, I was just like, okay, this. And in fact,
Yeah.
the initial launch of that, probably now that I think about it, probably did worse than the career
Mhm.
course. But I just felt
Mm.
like, no, we've got something here.
Mm.
We're on to something here. So, so I think part of it was kind of, thinking about the market, thinking about, what I was excited about, and also just kind of the intuition of like, are we onto something? Is there something here? Can we dig into this, or do we need to pivot and go a different direction?
Yeah, and probably you're seeing like there's other angles to attack this at
Sure.
versus the other one. You're kind of like, I don't know. Like, how do I wrap stuff around this thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the other thing was like you said, and I think it's important to kind of point that out is like there's certain steps to arrive to the destination. The other one is kind of
Yes.
like, you can go over there. You can,
Right.
it's like this way here. You're like, no. If you want to do it, I've done it. These are the steps that I would do over again. Here
Yep.
they are, and you just lay it out for them. One other quick question. How did you sell that, your first training? I'm just curious. Like, how did you, because I mean, back then, Facebook ads, but like, was it like it is now? Like, how did you get traffic?
Yeah. So a couple things. One is at the time I was having more and more people that were just emailing me and just reaching out
Okay.
and saying, hey, I want to be a speaker. I've seen your website and I've heard
Mhm.
your stuff. I wasn't like, I didn't, I was doing the podcast, but it wasn't specifically for speakers or anything.
Okay.
And so I had a bunch of people who were emailing me. So some of it was keeping track of that and following up with those people. Hey, if I did some type of training, would that be something you'd be interested in?
Mhm.
So that was something, which again is kind of a good validation of paying attention to what people are already asking you questions about.
Mhm.
And so I was getting a lot of questions along those lines. So that was a big part of it initially. And then once we were like, okay, we're on to something, let's do more of this, then we definitely did a lot of Facebook ads. And I didn't know anything about Facebook ads. I worked with several different contractors over the course of the first couple of years,
Mhm.
and largely doing a mix of live and automated webinars. And
Mhm.
so one thing that I think worked well for us was I was kind of looking around at what were other people doing? Like how does that business model apply to me? Because I knew I didn't want to do like any one-on-one coaching. I wasn't really excited about that. And okay, I see some people doing a course. How are they selling it? Okay, I see they do webinars. Some of them do these launches. Okay, what would that look like for us? And just like paying attention to what's working and how
Sure.
do you model it? And it's still to this day,
Sure.
it's something I do. So I'll give you a quick example. Like today, what that looks like. We have a decent sized team, but there's a role we were considering hiring for. And so one of the things I did yesterday was there's a couple other um, uh, companies that I keep an eye on that they have like their not necessarily their org chart, but like their staff on their
Sure.
website. And so it's kind of pulling up some of them and saying like, okay, what does this role look like for some of these other companies? It's just
Mhm.
as an example, as a gauge.
Sure.
Okay, here's a company that has kind of a similar model in a different industry. Here's what this person does for them, kind of what that, okay, I could see how that would work for us. I'm looking for examples. Like, again, if you're thinking about driving a car at night, well, someone's made a map of the road,
Sure.
and so like, let's look ahead. Now I may not take the exact same map, but at least give me some ideas here of what's up ahead. And so that's something even to this day, like I try to look at, and again, I think is a great question for any entrepreneur, is like, who's doing something similar to what you want to do and is like a step or two ahead of you, not light years ahead of you, but a step or two ahead of you that you can learn from and model.
Yeah, no, I love that. You got to be able to model. All right. I know we're going to be wrapping up here. You got a hard stop here coming up, but I did want to dig into this really quickly. Okay. You are teaching people how to get speaking gigs at conferences most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Conferences aren't really happening right now, at least in my world. I don't know
Yep.
about you, Grant, but
Yep.
I actually had an event scheduled for, well, the time that we're recording this is like the week of,
Yep.
and that's been postponed until 2021. Hopefully we'll be able to do it then. What happens? Okay. This happens to your business.
Yep.
Walk me through your mental like state and kind of like, then how did you pivot and how did you get to where you are now, to where you're actually doing really, really well?
Yeah. So again, I think some of this goes back to you're driving the car at night. And so when this happens, you're kind of watching it unfold. And I remember for the first few weeks, it was kind of scary, you know, because you're exactly like you described, of going, it's obviously affecting the world. But when events are canceling left and right and speakers aren't able to speak and people are losing their jobs and it's just affecting the overall economy, you're just like, well, crap. Well, now what, you know? And so it was kind of one of those like slow motion car crashes that you can't stop, you can't do anything about, that's completely outside of your control. And so when everything kind of happened in mid-March, I'm personally not doing a ton of speaking gigs. I had a couple in the spring that were postponed, but I was also like reaching out to a ton of other speakers, like just kind of trying to keep a pulse on what's happening, how are people pivoting, what should speakers be doing right now. And one of the things that we were seeing was more and more virtual opportunities that were happening. And pre-COVID, there were and are still a lot of virtual opportunities. It just was not one of those things that was, I guess, not that common. It was one of those things that like a lot of speakers, a lot of events didn't take super seriously. And now all of a sudden it was like, it's the only option. And so we really leaned in heavily to that. We started teaching, here's how you find and book, virtual gigs. Here's how you deliver virtual gigs. Here's the technology that you need, the setup that you need, some of those things that you need to be thinking about. So we made a quick pivot to that in May, and put together a new program on that, teaching that. That did really, really well in May. And then, so May ended up being a record month for us. June was still strong. And then July ended up being a record month for us as well. Wow. And since then we've had really, really, really strong months. And so, admittedly, there are times where I'm just like, what in the world? Like I would have thought things would be way, way worse. And I'm still like, again, I would go back to what we talked about earlier, that I don't know that you ever feel like, man, we've got it. We're good. We're set. Like who knows how this is going to happen, how this is going to continue to play out, how long this is going to go, the long-term implications on things. But I remember even there's maybe a month ago or so, I was doing a group Q&A call with some of our students, and some students who had just joined one of our programs within the past few weeks. I remember we were kind of wrapping up the call, and I remember just straight up asking them, like, they'd already joined, they're already in. And I was like, now seems like a horrible time to join something like this. Why are you all here? And just trying to like half joking, half serious. Right. And several of them said like, either I've always wanted to be a speaker. Now's as good a time as any. Or I lost my job, or I was downsized, or I might lose my job, and I have more free time. I want to invest in myself now. And just those type of answers. And so one of the things that we've seen is there are a lot of speakers who have certainly been dramatically affected, but we're also seeing a lot of speakers who've pivoted well, who are still doing really, really well. In fact, several of our students who are doing more virtual stuff, who are doing more coaching and consulting, are just killing it. I was texting with a speaker friend actually this morning. I said, hey, how are events looking for you? What's the rest of the year look like? And he said, I got a lot of virtual gigs. It's not as much fun as the in-person stuff, but it's working. He said, I'm already actually getting a lot of stuff in person booked for next year. So like, it sucks, this weird world that we're in. But again, that's part of business. It's not always going to be smooth. It's not always going to go the way that you plan. And so part of being an entrepreneur is, again, adjusting and pivoting as you go.
Yeah, no, those are great points. And I'm glad that we brought it back full circle, because I mean, you've been down that road, right? Pivots along the way. And then this one here, when I seen this happen, the pandemic, I thought of you, because I'm like, these speakers, these events, all this stuff, they've got, well, I actually had John Gordon on the podcast.
Yep,
I interviewed him, and he's like, for a minute there, man, like our legs were like chopped off from underneath us, and I got a team and I got people to feed. And that was that was a lot of our business. And it's just gone. Right. And so you had to kind of gather yourself and figure out the next move. And that's what they've done. And I'm like, I kind of joked with him. I'm like, yeah, you're the positive guy. You're the guy.
Have to do that.
He goes, listen, I might be known as the positive guy, but I'm not always positive. Let me just set the record straight. And I'm like, well, yeah. But anyway, all right. So Grant, let people know a little bit more about how they can learn more about you. And if they ever did want to get into speaking, or even just get their message out there, or just follow you online, where would they go to do that?
Yeah, everything that we do for speakers is over at thespeakerlab.com, thespeakerlab.com. We have a new book called The Successful Speaker, 5 Steps for Booking Gigs, Getting Paid, Building Your Platform. So go check that out on Amazon or wherever books are sold. And then we have a podcast called the Speaker Lab Podcast. So we have over 300 podcast episodes there. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably listen to other podcasts. So definitely check that one out as well, the Speaker Lab Podcast. But yeah, if there's anything I can do to help serve, support those that are interested in speaking or just entrepreneurship in any way, I think that a big reason I've had any level of mediocre success is because of people like you, Scott. You and I connected through, like we mentioned, Jamie, and you and I have compared notes along the way. And there are days where we're just like, hey, you and I are just figuring it out as well. But surrounding yourself with other people who are on the journey with you has been incredibly, incredibly valuable. So incredibly grateful for your friendship, Scott, and I appreciate you letting me be here.
Yeah, no problem. Maybe next time we'll have to get you back on, and we'll just have to trade notes on the Airbnb stuff that we're working on.
We're both just figuring it out as we go.
That's it. All right, Grant. Well, hey, have an awesome day, man. Stay safe, and we'll be in touch. And we'll definitely get you back on here in the future, get an update, see how things are going. But thanks, man. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, so there you have it. I wasn't kidding. What a great guy. And I'm so lucky to have people like him in my life. And now being able to bring people like that into the podcast to introduce them to you. I mean, it just comes full circle. It's just amazing that I'm able to do that. And I'm so glad that I am. So hopefully you got a ton from that. And even if you just like to listen to these stories to say, you know what? That guy sounds a lot like me, or that girl sounds a lot like me, whatever. Sometimes we need that. Sometimes we need to know that, you know what, that person sounds like they have a similar story than me, or I remember going through something similar to that. Whenever we can relate to someone's story, it makes us a believer in ourselves. And I really think after you listen to an interview like that, how can you not look at where you've been and where you're going a little bit differently? And I love the analogy that Grant used as far as your headlights can only see so far, but we want to see like so far down the line, but we really only need to see just enough to stay on the road, right? Yeah, we want to look a little bit ahead. We want to plan out our map, but we know that sometimes you're going to get a flat tire, right? Sometimes the car is going to break down, right? Or sometimes you might just say, you know what, I feel like going in a different direction, and you can, right? But I just love that analogy because we always think we got to see so far ahead. In reality, we just got to see far enough to where we're going next. All right. So guys, that's going to wrap up this episode. Go check out Grant. He's a great guy. If you're ever thinking about getting into speaking or anything like that, definitely he's the guy. He's the guy that I would go to. And he's actually someone that I am going to, because when I do want to do more speaking gigs, or when we can eventually do speaking gigs, or virtual speaking gigs, he's the guy that I always go to and ask for advice. So I would definitely just check him out. He's just a great guy, and you're going to learn a ton, just even if you pay attention to his marketing. The guy's got a good marketing sense too. All right, guys, so that's it. That's going to wrap it up. As always, remember, I'm here for you. I believe in you, and I am rooting for you. But you have to, come on, say it with me, say it loud, say it proud, take action. Have an awesome, amazing day, and I'll see you right back here on the next episode. Now let's rock your brand.